Hello friends, in this video we are going to learn the rule of the square. In this position we are white. We want to push our pawn to a8 and make a queen. Black's king will come and try to stop the pawn. Now the question is, can we push our pawn and make a queen, or Black's king will be able to stop us? One way is to simply calculate all the moves. We play pawn to a5, Black's king come to e7, then we push the pawn to a6, Black's king come to d7, a7, king c7, and we make a queen. So Black's king cannot stop us. Or there is another way, and it is known as the rule of the square. We create a square from this position, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a square. If Black's king is in this square, then Black's king can stop our pawn. If Black's king is not in this square, then Black's king cannot stop our pawn. It's that simple. We don't have to calculate anything. In this case, Black's king is outside this square, so Black cannot capture our pawn. We can push the pawn and make a queen. Using the rule of the square, we don't have to calculate all the moves. It saves us time. Let's say in this position it is Black to move, and this is the square. So can you tell me, will Black be able to capture the pawn or not? It is Black to move, and because it is Black to move, Black can play king to e7 and come in the square. So Black is in the square, and that's why Black can easily stop the pawn. We don't have to calculate the moves. After a5, Black can just come here and capture the pawn. In this position we are white. Our pawn is about to become a queen, but the problem is Black's king is near our pawn, and Black can easily come here and stop this. And Black's pawn on h5 is going to become a queen. Our king is very far away from the h5 square, so we cannot stop the pawn. How do we save this position? It looks like that we are going to lose the game. But White has a way to save the game. If White tries to simply capture the pawn by playing king h7, then Black can push the pawn and White cannot capture the pawn. So this straightforward move does not work. And if White simply tries to push the pawn, then after king to b7, this attempt fails. So White has to find a different way. And that different way is that White has to use this diagonal. White has to play king to g7. Now Black will try to play pawn to h4 to make a queen. And now we again play king to f6. Now Black has two choices. Black can push the pawns, try to make a queen, or Black can play king to b6 to capture the pawn. If Black plays pawn to h3, then we play king to e6. After pawn to h2, we can push this pawn, and if Black promotes, then we also promote with a check. So Black plays king b7, now we play king d7. If Black plays h1 is equal to queen, then we also promote, and the game is a draw. So here, directly pushing the pawn does not work. So Black tries king to b6. Now White plays king to e5. Still walking on this diagonal, our idea is that we can also go toward this side to support the pawn, or we can also come to this side to capture this pawn. Now here, if Black captures our pawn, then we come to f4 and we can easily catch this pawn because we are in the square. And if we are in the square, we can capture the pawn. And the game ends in a draw. And in this position, if Black plays pawn to h3, then we are not in the square. So we cannot capture this pawn. We have to go here, king to d6. After pawn to h2, White pushes the pawn. If Black makes a queen, White will also make a queen and the game will be a draw. If Black plays king to b7, then we play king to d7 and the game is still a draw. Using the rule of the square, we could quickly decide whether we should capture the pawn or we should protect our own pawn. Let's look at next example. In this position we are white. Our pawn is going to this side of the board. We want to make a queen and black's pawn is coming to the h1. If we start pushing these pawns, we know that black's king is in this square. So black will easily capture the pawn. And if white plays king to e8 trying to capture this pawn, then black can play pawn to h5 and white's king is not in this square. So white cannot capture our pawn. So what should white do? In this position, white has to play king to c8. Idea is, if black plays pawn to h5, then white can push the pawn to a6, and in the next move after king to c6, we can push the pawn to a7 and black's king cannot stop our pawn. So after king to c8, black has to play king to c6. And then we play king to b8. Again, if black pushes the pawn to h5, then we push the pawn to a6, king to b6. After e7, we make a queen. So black has to play king to b5 to capture our pawn. And now we play king to b7. After black captures the pawn, we play king to c6. After pawn to h5, our king is in the square. Let's find the square. This is the square and it is our turn. We can play king to d5 and our king is in the square, so we can capture this pawn. And the game ends in a draw. We don't need to calculate all the moves. We already know the outcome of the game by knowing the rule of the square. Let's see the next position. I'm going to ask you a question and you will have 10 seconds to answer the question. My question is, should white capture the queen or not? Can you tell me the answer without calculating any moves? And answer is yes, white should capture the queen. After queen capture, black will play king cross c7 and look at the square. This is the square. Black's king is outside this square. So if we start pushing the pawn, black's king cannot capture our h4 pawn and we make a queen. So this is a winning game. So using the rule of the square, we can quickly reach a conclusion whether opponent's king can capture our pawn or not. Queen cross e7, king cross e7, we start pushing the pawns and black's king cannot capture our pawn. Let's look at the next example. In this position, can we push our pawn and make a queen? This is the square and we can see that black's king is in this square, so we cannot push our pawn and make a queen. What about this position? First, as white, we need to make a passed pawn. We play pawn to d6, force black to capture this pawn and we got our passed pawn. Now my question is, if we start pushing this pawn, can black king capture our pawn or not? You will say that black's king is in the square. So black's king can easily capture the pawn. But here there is a problem. Black's pawn is on d6 and it is stopping the path of the black king. If white start pushing the pawn, then after king e5, black cannot play king to d6 because black's pawn is blocking the path. So black has to waste a move to play king e6 and that helps us white to win the game. Black is one move late in the game. So when you are using the rule of the square, you have to make sure that king's path is not blocked. No one is blocking the king's path. I hope the rule of square is clear to you. See you in the next video.